across the sea of life, so much pain, warring divides. It's a shame we don't see how it can be. Oh, we need to smile at each other, wish for your brother, help one another. All we need is love.
Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you all.
Our mother, shelter our sisters, all to existence. God's help will come from above. But first we need the love.
Welcome to another episode of The Y Factor, listeners. Today is Thursday, the 24th of November. And joining me in the studio as a co-host is Zaynab Hawa. Welcome to the show, Zaynab.
Assalamu alaikum, Tasnim. Thanks for having me.
Wa alaikum assalam. All right, this week, inshallah, we have a very, very important, pertinent, and highly important, I can't stress how important it is,
Very important.
episode in regards to domestic violence against women in light of White Ribbon Day, which will be officially tomorrow. Is that right?
Yep, tomorrow.
So, Zainab, just quickly, in 30 seconds or less, I'm timing you, and this is a test on air. Tell us, what is White Ribbon Day about?
White Ribbon Day is essentially a national campaign to prevent women violence against women. It was a campaign instigated by males because there was an incident whereby a male killed, I think it was 13 colleagues who were all female.
Whoa.
So it was very targeted towards females, and that's how White Ribbon Day started.
Okay, so obviously we know violence can be perpetrated by women against men and men against women and vice versa.
Yep,
But
definitely.
this particular campaign was initiated by men to bring to the fore violence against women specifically.
Yep.
So inshallah, on the show this week we have two very, very important guests. We have Maha Najjarine, who's a lawyer and deals with this stuff, and we also have Sheik Haisam Farache, who is also a sheikh, a lawyer, the serving imam as you might know him, and who also deals with family disputes, mediation and the like. So mashallah, they have a lot of very, very important information to share with us, so make sure you stay tuned. Now my English is just a bit weird today. But just for some international news really quickly, Yemen's President Ali Abdullah Saleh actually signed a deal last night to quit after 33 years in power following 10 months of protests against his rule in Yemen. Basically, Mr. Saleh signed this deal, and which made him the fourth leader to be forced down from power following the Arab Spring. And he actually gave the power to his deputy, Abdurrabu Mansour Hadi, and it will actually be an early election. And get this, Zainab, the actual ceremony was hosted by King Abdullah Saleh, King Abdullah from Saudi Arabia, and it was held in Riyadh. So it feels like the king is actually doing something constructive for once.
Yeah.
Now that's really ironic because in Saudi Arabia itself, some protests and stuff have been breaking out, especially in the city of Qatif, and 14 people were actually injured after clashes on Monday. Now the Interior Ministry actually blamed the protest on an unnamed foreign power, which is usually code name for Iran,
Right.
because this area is actually a very Shia-dominated area.
Mm-hmm.
And the actual official quote from the ministry says, a group of instigators inspired by a foreign country gathered at Al-Awamiya village near Qatif at 9 p.m. on Monday and tried to undermine security. And as a result, obviously, the crackdown. So maybe this king, funky Abdullah should broke a pieces in his own region.
Perhaps, maybe.
All right. Speaking of the Arab Spring in Egypt, although, alhamdulillah, we thought Mubarak's gone, there's actually been massive demonstrations again in Tahrir Square. And this is basically the people are calling for an ending of the military regime. They're saying, Mubarak was kicked out only to get SCAF back in. And, the way they're treating the, protesters and things like that is just totally ridiculous. And they actually have been calling for a million-man march in Cairo's central Tahrir Square to put a pressure on this SCAF, which is the Supreme Council of Armed Forces, to step down and give power to the civilians.
Yeah.
So it's great to see, mashallah, the Egyptians.
It is. It's great to see that they're still wanting to see the revolution happen, that it hasn't died yet, and they're still persevering with putting pressure on the military to stop their...
Exactly, like they're not just happy with,
Exactly.
Mubarak gone, like they're actually advocating for something a lot more. So staying with the Middle East now, Zaynab, this is so cool. The Middle East is dominating the world. Now, I'm not like a conspiracy theorist. They're doing this in a very civilized manner through aircrafts, right?
Wow.
Now, not like the fighter jets and stuff like that. Gulf carriers have actually spoken about their ambition to redraw world travel maps and turn the region into a global travel hub, basically through their airways. And they had this Dubai air show last week. So manufacturers of Boeing and Airbus have actually embraced this vision, and they're actually supplying very new young carriers to these airlines, namely Dubai-owned Emirates Airlines and Abu Dhabi's Etihad Airways, and also Doha's based Qatar Airways. And get this, the deal was worth $18 billion, and Qatar Airways alone bought 50 Airbus single aisle carrier thingies, and this is a part of their plan. So yeah, it seems like that region's going to have a lot of, travel on its hand.
Yeah, no, it is. That's a very clever move for them, I guess.
Honestly, this region, I think they're starting to realise once their oil's going to run out, they're going to need other sorts of business.
Avenue.
Exactly. So they're establishing the infrastructure for that. And in Australian news, the Speaker of the House, Harry Jenkins, has actually resigned, shocking Parliament after its final sitting for 2011. Mr. Jenkins' resignation could actually change the fine balance of power of the hung Parliament. Because at the moment, basically, a hung parliament means that both houses actually have equal numbers of votes and things like that. But the Deputy Speaker of the Liberals, Mr. Slipper, said that Tony Abbott could actually lose 2 numbers on the floor, which means that the Liberals will have an extra vote. So, again, it was very shocking, and we're still waiting to see the fallout from that. But that's what's happening in Australian news. Anything else that's pertinent, Zaynab? I think that's about it for local and international news. Oh yeah, and Kyle, abused that women on air about being fat or something. And,
he did?
Yeah, and Holden withdrew the sponsorship. So at the Y Factor, we're going to be very careful to be sensitive to our
otherwise
audience.
I'm going to go and complain against what you've already said to me, Tasnim.
We have no sponsors anyway. Hey, that's a call out for sponsored. If you're interested in sponsoring the Y Factor, trust me, we will make very, very sensitive and educated comments, and we will not offend your sensitivities in any way.
They'll be very culturally appropriate.
We are. Especially when the boys come on. Have you heard the episodes? Allah sad, seriously. Anyway, we're not bagging out fellow, co-hosts. They're very awesome. Mashallah, may Allah guide them all. But that brings us to the end of the news episode, inshallah. We're going to take a very short break, and we'll be here with our first interview with Maha Najjarine about the White Ribbon campaign. So with that, I'll leave you to it. You're listening to The Y Factor on 87.6 FM.
The Y Factor.
Feel all alone in this world, and there's nobody to count your tears. Just remember, no matter where you are, Allah knows. Allah knows. When you're carrying a monster load, and you wonder how far you can go, with every step on that road that you take, Allah knows. Allah knows. No matter what, inside or out, there's one thing of which there's no doubt. Allah knows. Allah knows. And whatever lies in the heavens and the heavens, every star in this whole universe, Allah knows. Allah knows. When you find that special someone, feel your whole life has barely begun. You can walk on the moon, shout it to everyone. Allah knows. Allah knows. When you gaze with love in your eyes, catch a glimpse of paradise, and you see your child take the first breath of life. Allah knows. Allah knows. No matter what, inside or out, there's one thing of which
Factor.
Assalamu alaikum, welcome back from the break. With us now is Maha Najjarine. Sister Maha is an arts and law graduate majoring in psychology. She is a solicitor with the Women's Legal Services. Prior to becoming a solicitor, Maha was a culturally and linguistically diverse specialist worker at the Domestic Violence Court Advocacy Program. As a solicitor, Maha provides advice regarding family and civil law matters. She also does community legal education and is an advocate for legislative change for victims of domestic violence. In 2010, Maha was elected to represent Australia at the International Youth Summit in South Africa to discuss issues of violence against children and women. From that stemmed a project called Safe in Our Place. And Maha is also an executive member of Mission of Hope and a social justice project coordinator with Justice and Arts Network.
Welcome to the show, Maha.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum to everyone.
Alaikum salam.
So, Maha, can you just please tell us, in your experience working in all these projects, and what's the reality like of domestic violence in Australia?
Domestic violence in Australia is a very serious issue. Even though Australia is probably more advanced than other countries when it comes to responses and legislative change and reform, those sorts of things, there is still a very, very high number. We have been told that 1 in 3 women have experienced or are experiencing some forms of domestic violence.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a huge number, a very serious number that should be addressed, particularly us as Muslims, because we are meant to be the advocates of women's rights.
So Maha, what obstacles do women face when trying to come forward and tell somebody that they're going through an abusive relationship, or that somebody at home is being abusive to them, whether it's physically, financially, emotionally, or sexually?
Well, as we know, there are many reasons why women remain in abusive relationships and find it difficult to report. Domestic violence is a very complex issue and it has many facets to it. Some clients have often wished that they took action earlier, but have said that they didn't know what services are out there, that they don't know the laws, they don't know what the legal options are. Many women have also told me that they were not supported by family and friends, and it is not uncommon for women to tell me that their family will disown them if they leave the abusive relationship. Some women have also told me that they were told to keep quiet in order to uphold family honour. There is also a lot of community pressure to remain, and often told that they will be the cause of breaking up family. Sadly, we have many community leaders who do not take a strong stance when it comes to domestic violence. Even though they would say it's wrong and not in accordance with our religion, nothing really is done to support women other than perhaps being told to remain patient. And a woman's safety should be the paramount concern in all of this, including not only their physical well-being but also their psychological well-being. Often men will threaten women to send them back home. This is common if a woman comes from overseas. And if a woman comes from a war-torn, stricken poverty country where divorcees are not respected at all, it's a very frightening concept. So they opt to just remain in the abusive relationship. Many women, particularly newly arrived migrants and refugees, saw what sacrifices it took in order to come to Australia. So they feel that they should be grateful and just accept that they have a better life here. Another big factor that I've seen recently is women wanting to protect community's image. And I found this to be very common within minority groups, including Muslims, who, let's face it, we don't exactly have the best reputation at the moment. Many women also fear discrimination in the process, and that the perpetrators of violence will receive harsher treatment from authorities because they come from minority groups. So a lot of women will keep it a secret. A lot of women will not notify the police or appropriate authorities because they're concerned that they will be treated more harshly. Many women are often manipulated and made to believe that certain practices or acts are cultural or religious practices, and so if they defy them, then they are betraying their community and or their faith. Unfortunately, many women have not had the education or the opportunities to challenge these ideas, so often these beliefs are passed down from generation to generation. It is very difficult. It is very difficult to just pick yourself up and leave, especially if there are children involved. And I have many clients who it's taken 7 to 8 times before they finally make that decision. Women are concerned about a number of issues, including housing, finances, and schooling for the children, particularly if the woman is financially dependent on the perpetrator. So I think it's important for us, as hopefully advocates of women's rights, to support women through this process, to educate them.
In your experience as being a specialist worker with the Domestic Violence Court Advocacy Program, do you think women from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds, their experiences of domestic violence are somewhat different to women of the general?
In terms of experiences, I would say they're very much the same. Mm-hmm. So the impact that it has on them and the barriers to leave are very similar. Mm-hmm. The difference is the techniques of domestic violence used by the perpetrator. So there are things like, threats to cancel the visa, threats to, harm family back home. There's, she's not allowed to learn English or learn how to drive if she's from overseas. Threats to shame her as an adulteress in the community. This is a big one, that if she was to leave, then she somehow had an affair with someone else, and this is the reason why she left, not because he was abusive. Using culture or religion as an excuse for being violent is also very, very common. And women are often manipulated to the extent where they almost feel that this is the case. This is what their religion tells them. This is what their culture tells them.
So, Maha, I know you were speaking about people specifically from overseas, but obviously these problems can be encountered
Definitely.
by even, Australian born and raised. And so in your opinion, why is this the case? Is it due to a lack of awareness, for example?
Ultimately, domestic violence is about power and control. I don't like to use particular reasons or excuses for perpetrators of violence because I think that just gives them a way out. I've heard many women say that they just have an anger management problem. They're just addicted to alcohol, those sorts of things. But when I ask my clients, are they as violent as they are to you, to other people on the street? Are they abusive to their bosses, to their work colleagues, to their friends? And the answer is always no. So domestic violence, it must be understood that it's targeted and it's intended and it's directed.
Okay, Maha, speaking of domestic abuse, obviously there's many types of domestic abuse, and I think sometimes the victims don't actually realise that they're suffering from abuse. So things, for example, comments that, for example, the husband might say something like, oh, you just don't know how to do things properly, or you're just fat, or don't go out, and things like that.
Yeah.
Although they might start off as these small comments, they're actually psychological and emotional abuse.
Definitely.
And people don't realise this. So can you just let us know some of the types of abuse so people are actually able to identify in their own lives if they actually come to suffer from any of them?
At the workshops, when I present to women and we talk about domestic violence, I always say to them, arguments is not domestic violence. So, people arguing with one another, couples arguing is very common. What is illegal and what is domestic violence is when one partner tries to control and overpower his partner. So even trying to stand over your partner during an argument is a form of domestic violence. Trying to show, that you're a bigger, stronger person. It is a form of domestic violence. Cruelty to pets, damaging property. These are also forms of domestic violence. And also isolation. So we've seen a lot of matters where men don't allow women to obtain an education or spend time with family and friends, those sorts of things. Basically isolating her from the rest of the community. This is another form of domestic violence.
What steps or actions do you think we as a community can collectively do to help victims of abuse and violence, or to even essentially prevent this from happening? So as a friend, as a sister, as a mother, as a brother, what can we do as neighbours, as community leaders, do you think?
I think the first thing is always to stand by her and support her. I have known many women, so my clients are generally feel disempowered because they don't have the support of family and friends in the community. I feel that there needs to be a stronger stance from the community. The community is not supporting women who are escaping domestic violence to how much they should be.
And obviously, on a personal level, that's done by, for example, as you said, showing support and not making the person feel ostracised for seeking help and things like that. But structurally, for example, I know your project, the Safe in Our Homes project. In Our Place.
Yeah.
So that was obviously a practical solution to domestic violence. Can you tell us about this project?
Well, basically, it was just after we had come back from South Africa, we were meant to implement a project back home. And what we decided to do is that we needed to target a disadvantaged and vulnerable group. And we thought that the newly arrived migrant communities and refugees were one of those. We also spoke to a number of different community and settlement workers, and we noticed that they didn't really understand the concept of domestic violence within these groups. They were almost patronising and felt that because they come from, war-torn, poverty-stricken countries, then they know better. And so this kind of undermined all the hard work that women had done back in those countries. They are advocates for women's rights. They do stand up against domestic violence. So the first part of the project was to train settlement and community workers about domestic violence within court communities and refugee communities. So we first of all said that it's not an accepted practice. This is not something that the culture or the religion accept. And really, if they do say that it is a cultural practice, then it's ultimately an excuse to protect the men, to protect the aggressors and the abusers of and the perpetrators of domestic violence. So basically, this project is a statewide project. Because a lot of the newly arrived migrants and refugees have been placed out in rural countries, rural regions around New South Wales, we wanted to go to them. So we flew out to areas like Wagga and Orange and Albury and Griffith and a number of different places where refugees have resettled. And we spoke to the community workers there, and we gave them techniques and examples of what occurs within those cultures.
And in your experience, like obviously you guys had, evaluation and things like that. Those actions, did they actually make a difference?
Definitely. Women are now much more knowledgeable about the laws in Australia. They know what their options are. They know where to get help. So, for example, many women felt that just because the property is not under their name, that they had to leave the household. And of course, this would be a huge barrier for women escaping domestic violence, especially if they have young children. So, we explain to them the different options like an AVO, which, there are ways where you can remain married as husband and wife and still have an AVO for your protection. We also I explained to them other things such as getting financial independence through Centrelink, the Staying Home Leaving Violence program, those sorts of things.
So essentially, you provided mechanisms to empower these women and their children.
Well, I think in order to empower women, you need to provide them with the knowledge and the resources. And if you provide them with that, then they have the ability to choose. And because I strongly believe that if you remove a woman's right to choose, then you have disempowered them. You have cut off their ability to make choices freely.
I think that's really important because a lot of times people are very scared to seek help because they feel like, for example, they're going to be told what to do. They're going to be told to leave. They're going to be told to do these.
Definitely. And to some extent that is true though. Because if there are allegations of child abuse, then docs will get involved and will say that if you don't leave this abusive man, then we will remove the children from your care. So there is some truth to that. However, it's done very rarely. It's only done in extreme cases, and docs don't even have the resources to act on every single matter, unfortunately. So it's not as common as people make out to be.
I think it's another deterrence mechanisms used by the
definitely
males that want control. Hey, don't, because you're going to ruin the family, you're going to ruin everything. Definitely. Okay, Maha, and just finally, mashallah, you seem to be very, very passionate about this topic and very, very inspired. Can I just ask you, why is this the case? Like, alhamdulillah, it's positive, but I just wanted to know, and our listeners to know, what's actually driven you and motivated you to become so passionate about such a topic?
I think because I'm a Muslim woman, and all Muslim women should be advocates of women's rights. And for years, I've read so many articles, so many books, heard from so many sheikhs about the status of women in Islam. Yet, that is not the case in reality. Unfortunately, women are objectified. Women are not respected to how they should be. And of course, I'm not wanting to make general comments about all families here, but there is a staggering number of abuse out there. So there should be a stronger stance on domestic violence. I've been working in this sector for almost 10 years now. I have met so many women who have experienced very severe forms of domestic violence and sexual assault. I have seen the effects that it's had on them, and I've seen the effects that it's had on their children. They are dramatic. They are very serious. And some women will never get out of their psychological state.
SubhanAllah.
It is very, very sad to see that a woman is so crushed that she has no self-esteem, that she has no ability to get up sometimes.
She's basically stuck in this predicament, and
Definitely,
if you feel like that you can do something about it, then...
And when you provide them with a few options, like, you know, you have a right to live free from violence. You have a right to not fear for your safety. And these are your options available. You can get an AVO. You can remain in the relationship if you want. But you also have the choice to leave the relationship if you want. And these are the services and the things that you can do is very empowering for women.
I think that's a take-home message for all of our listeners, inshallah.
Yeah.
It's all about empowerment, and it's about making choices that at the same time are beneficial to you, to your family, but at the same time give you the option too, so you're not always the victim in, you know, any circumstance.
Definitely. I've seen one woman in particular who had come to Australia and was completely tortured. The domestic violence she experienced is unheard of almost, and she is now working. She is now going to TAFE, learning English. She's learned how to drive, and she's just a completely changed woman.
And subhanAllah, that was a result of a choice or two she made that put her down that path.
This is because she had finally made that decision that she deserved better, that she is no longer going to be beaten up every day, mistreated by her husband, and felt that there is more to life than
getting beaten.
Yeah. Okay, so Maha, we'd like to sincerely thank you for coming and giving us your time today. And I'd just like to say a really profound respect for the work you do. Not only are you helping women combat domestic violence, but you're also essentially helping protect one of the fundamental principles of Islam. So all hats to you.
The Y Factor.
Okay, everyone, it's random spotlight once again. So I'm going to call a random phone number on my phone, and this person is going to go live on radio. Here we go. Ooh, the suspense. Mr. Emad, it's Mohammed from the Y Factor. How are you? Yeah, we got you live on radio at the moment. It's part of our random spotlight segment. How are you going today?
I'm excellent. Yourself?
Not too bad. So can you tell our listeners out there a bit about what you do?
A bit about what I do?
Yeah.
In what, my occupation was?
Yeah, your occupational capacity.
Am I seriously on air?
Yeah, you are.
Okay. I work for the AFO as a multicultural programs coordinator.
Awesome. What does that entail? What do you do?
So what I do, I try to promote the game of AFL within multicultural and diverse communities. So we go from school around to schools and juvenile justice dinners, community festivals, community events, and try to give the community or that community a service.
Fantastic. And do you think it's important to engage refugee communities once they arrive?
Yeah, so that's very important. So a lot of the programs we run schools in are called IHC schools. So they're intense English centers. So a lot of the migrants that first come to Australia, they go into them schools, usually secondary school students, and they teach them English. So what we offer is we go into the schools and we offer a free 6-week program where we teach them about Australian football, Australian Football League, and then we give them free backpacks and AFL goodies, and then we subsidize them if they wish to join a club. So a lot of them join clubs, so we pay their fees, buying footy boots, that sort of thing.
Sounds really good. You know what? We should probably bring you into the studio instead of giving you a few minutes on the random spotlight segment.
I only get 2 minutes.
Yeah, you've only got a few minutes. I mean, this is it's a random segment, but you seem very interesting. You seem to have a very interesting capacity, so we might bring you in, Mr. Ilki.
I got comfortable. I haven't even started yet.
Fantastic. Any final message to our Y Factor listeners out there?
I got a good one. Multicultural matters.
Multicultural matters. Well, there you have it. First, Imad Ilki, who is representing the multicultural program from the AFL. Well done, mate. You handled yourself pretty well in this segment.
Thank you very much. We'll hear from you soon.
Inshallah. Take care. Assalamu alaikum.
The Y Factor.
If you're a young female Muslim looking for a private hairdresser, then look no further. Ladies Only Hair and Beauty Lounge Room is a private female-friendly salon with locations in Auburn and Bankstown. Ladies Only provide hair services including colours, extensions, style cuts, keratin, waxing, IPL hair removal, bridal makeup and hair, including much more. Strictly no men allowed, and there's also video intercom upon entry for your peace of mind.
The Y Factor.
Exclusive offer for all Y Factor listeners. Ladies Only is offering 20% off all services until mid-December 2011. This offer is exclusive to the Auburn store only. For general inquiries, contact 1300 452 399, and for the exclusive Y Factor offer, contact Rima on 9643 5719.
The Y Factor.
Mountains of Mecca, what can you say of the day that Abraham passed your way? And he was instructed by God to build a house of peace where people will pray, and they will come on every lean camel and out of every ravine for the purpose of praising Allah, to glorify Allah. Oh, mountains of Mecca, what can you tell of the day that stones from the sky fell, destroying an army determined to break the house of Allah that Abraham built? Oh, mountains of Mecca, how was the dawn on the day that my prophet Muhammad was born? How did it feel knowing he was to be the last and most beloved of all, Rasul of Allah, Nabi of Allah? Oh, mountains of Mecca, you were there when the prophet Muhammad climbed down in despair. Engraved in his heart were the words of his Lord to all of mankind. This was his call: La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah. Oh, people, praise only Allah, glorify Allah.
Welcome back from the break, guys. Joining me in the studio today is Sheikh Haisam Farache. Sheikh Haisam Farache is a lawyer who specialises in family law, mediation, negotiation, separation, also wills and probate. He was a former imam at Imam Ali Mosque and currently teaches with Charles Sturt University. Welcome to the show, Sheikh.
Assalamu
alaikum. Sheikh, so as you know, our episode is about, White Ribbon Day and, violence against women. In your expert opinion, how would you actually define domestic and family violence?
I think there's quite a lot of social literature. I think there's quite a lot of social literature on the subject, and it's basically defined as in the marital relationship or the domestic relationship between a man and woman if they're unmarried. Of course, that doesn't normally apply to the Muslim situation, but mainly it's that the power imbalance and how that power imbalance between male and female is used. So it can be all different types. It can be financial abuse, it can be physical abuse, it can be verbal abuse, it can even be psychological abuse. And so they have the those different terms, the battered woman syndrome, or even these days the battered male or the battered man syndrome. And so when one party exerts their power and their force over the other, then that becomes an abuse, and there's different ways in which it manifests.
In respect to some of the types of abuse, people may not see it as a problem or may not see it as an abuse. What do you suggest people do in that case when they actually confront their partner, but their partner is not willing to acknowledge that they're doing something hurtful or that they're actually inflicting some sort of violence or abuse on their partner?
That's a really good point to bring up. It's like with anything that if somebody's sick, maybe they're not feeling so well, but they don't really know what the diagnosis is until they go see someone, a medical professional, and that person does the specific tests on them and then diagnoses them as whatever that ailment or that illness might be. So it's no different in terms of what you might call social ills, such as the abuse that we're speaking of, or whether it's mental ills, the different mental situations and illnesses that people have. So in that circumstance, when a person, be they male or female, feel that they're being oppressed, feel that they're not being treated fairly in their home, then firstly, the first thing that has to be done is to create that environment where two people can actually sit and talk. It's not when there is a conflict, it's in a time when there isn't conflict. And then that's in the first instance. And secondly, the actual place is very important. Sometimes the family home isn't the most appropriate place for people to speak. Sometimes they may need to go to a public place, a cafe or something like that, or a place of nature, maybe a beach or a national park or just a local park even. That might change the situation. So the place where that abuse has been going on, or the place where that power imbalance has been going on, that the actual environment, in other words, the physical environment has changed, and so that also changes the dynamic. So that's the first port of call. Specifically to Muslims, in my experience as an imam, that when we do sulh or mediation, that unfortunately most people, their first port of call is their parents, because that's their base of emotional support, whether it be male or female. And so they go off to their parents and they just tell them everything. And their parents, they might be a plumber or an electrician or a lawyer or a doctor or whatever it might be, but they're trained in a particular field, or their expertise is in a particular field, not in this field, not in how to deal with familial and in this sense marital relationships. So unfortunately, and the Mashiach have a classic call saying that the broth is already burnt by the time it comes to the Mashiach.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult for anyone to take anything from that. Not that parents don't mean well. They do mean well. They're trying their best. There's a difference between trying your best and having the skills to be able to decipher the situation and determine the best resolution or possible solutions for the couple. So my first suggestion would be not to go to your parents. I think it's a big mistake, because it just becomes more emotional. And the reason that people go to their parents is for that emotional support, which is fine.
And to often reaffirm what they're thinking anyway. It's like, how dare he treat you that way?
Exactly, that's what's going to happen. And all it's going to do is make people more positional. This is what I want, and I'm not budging, and that's how it's going to be. And all that does is create more conflict, and it's harder to resolve the situation. So my advice would be to go see one of the Mashiach, to go and speak to that person. Of course, all the dealings are confidential, and say, look, Sheikh, this is what's going on, this is what's happening in my marriage, what would you suggest? And generally, alhamdulillah, that every time that's ever happened with me, we've been able to resolve the situation. But it's very rare, not rare, but it's not so frequent when people go to their family members and they speak, because as you said, all they do is make them more positional. And if a person doesn't feel comfortable with the sheikh, then they can go and see there's a myriad of free services out there for counselling. It's Centre Care do it, and Catholic, they used to be Centre Care, Catholic Care and Anglicare. They have all these free services out there. You can go, the family relationship centres are there. There's heaps of services where trained professionals, they're not going to give you the Islamic perspective. You might not need that. But professionals who can either counsel you or they can mediate between you, depending on, there's a difference between counselling and mediation. Counselling, they look at the psychological aspects of what's going on, and mediation, they just look at the issues that are there and try and get the two parties to agree to some sort of agreement they both can live with.
Sheikh Haisam, a lot of times it's very hard for the victim to realise that, okay, enough is enough, and especially when it comes to, for example, being patient or persevering in a situation where they, for example, feel that the sanctity of the family unit or the sanctity of family life is so much higher than, for example, dealing with the situation. Now, what would be your advice to victims of situations like this, where they're actually undergoing experiencing family violence, but at the same time they're trying to strike a balance and saying, oh no, you know what, for the sake of the family I'm going to persevere. Like, when do you draw the line and say, look, enough is enough? And I think that's really hard.
I think that's a very difficult question to answer objectively. It's a subjective question that each individual has to look at that. The thing that I would definitely say is a flashing red light, the bells are going off, and it's when it becomes physical. When, you know, and it's generally the man that's doing it, generally the male is, you know, perpetrating some sort of physical violence upon his partner, then questions have to be asked by that individual, by the person who's the victim in that situation. And that is clear, Islamically speaking as well as legally speaking. There's no difference, but there's no differentiation between the two. So once that starts to happen, then of course a person always thinks, yes, the family. A person must also think that if I live, or my children are raised in a family where there's an abusive partner and they're seeing that abuse, what effect is that going to have on the children? How are they going to be as children firstly, and then how are they going to be as adults secondly, and thirdly, how are they going to be as spouses, whether it's a wife or a husband? What is going to be their impression of how to live life, how to treat their spouse? So that's a consideration, that just because a husband or a wife is there, doesn't, or a mother or father in that situation, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the best case scenario.
How do you deal with cases of domestic and family violence in your field of work?
Well, as mediators, family dispute resolution practitioners, we're what they call mandatory reporters. So we have to report any incidences, or in particular when there's what they call a risk of harm, then we have to report that to the relevant authorities, particularly if it concerns children, because of course children are the innocent parties in all this, and it's unfair and it's inhumane that they suffer the consequences of two adults committing such atrocities upon each other, or one committing an atrocity upon the other. In the legal sense, as a lawyer, I'm not under that same obligation, but once again I give pretty much the same advice to my clients as I gave in this interview, that once it becomes physical, then a person really needs to look at their situation. And then even sometimes, as an imam, I've even told some sisters to go to the police, because there's no way that I can protect them, and there's no way that the society can protect them. Now, it's a big move. If a wife decides to call the police on her husband for that situation, AVO is going to be automatic, pretty much. She doesn't have any choice in the matter, legally speaking. And then you can pretty much say that's pretty much the end of the marriage. It's, only in certain situations, and rarely when that happens. At the same time, people might be saying, oh, why is the Sheikh saying that? Why is that going on? Because that's the system in which we live in, and they're the police are the people who have the authority to enforce the law and protect individuals in society. If there can be an intervention before that, but once again, depending on the person, some people, they're just violent, or they're mentally ill, or there's other problems going on, and they just don't have the capacity to respond to an intervention, to other family members or mashaykh, whoever it might be, getting involved. So, safety is a consideration. That's one of the maqasid, one of the foundations of the Sharia. One of the purposes of the Sharia is to protect human life. And even Shara'an, that if a man does physically abuse his wife or assault her, and he, for example, breaks a finger or a tooth or whatever, then there's a compensation, there's a diya for that, just like there is when a person kills someone, but it's a percentage based. So, and this is going back, since the beginning, since the time of the Prophet of Allah, so it's not something to be taken lightly in any way, shape or form.
Sheikh, you're obviously very respected in the Muslim community. What would your advice personally be to members of our community which experiences violence just like any other community does? But what would your advice specifically be to our community in order to get rid of this culture that it's kind of okay, or for example verbal abuse is okay, or psychological abuse is okay, but when you get physical now, that's serious? Because a lot of times it's a slippery slope. Like when it starts on verbal abuse or psychological abuse, inevitably it leads to physical abuse. So what would your advice be to males and also sometimes females that perpetrate this type of abuse?
Yeah, I think that's a bit of a misnomer. We did a course a while ago, and the teachers of the course, the instructors, were saying that no, it's only men that do it. It's only men. And then a lady in the class who's been a social worker for more than 40 years, and she just started saying, look, it's not, that is just the different types of abuse perpetrated by different individuals. Of course, men tend to be physical, whereas women tend to be psychological in the way they approach things. So in regards to the Muslim community, my personal view is, Allah knows best, is that because we're generally a migrant community, even though that we're about 50% born in Australia, that our parents are generally migrants, and so we carry a lot of that baggage, and we're not really aware of it a lot of the times. And so in those societies, those closed societies, and I think all societies were closed irrespective of which country they came from, because that's just the way things were. People didn't travel far. Technology wasn't there to bring all that information from the other ends of the world instantaneously. So societies were a lot more closed than they are today. And so in those societies, there was greater controls on all people. And that meant, in particular, the marital relationship. And everyone was the same. They were the same culture, same religion, same background, same language, same food, same dress. And so the societies there were very closed. And the control over whether it was the husband and in particular the wife was a lot greater. And so now that we're in a different society or a different time as well, where everything's open, you can find out what's going on just about anywhere in the world. How true it is or not is a different story, but the information is there. People are doing a lot different things. That same closed societies don't really exist only in the most remotest of physical areas. In other words, in the outback of Australia, or in the rural areas in certain countries. But yet we still have that mentality of control. And I think personally, wallahu alam, that we need to overcome that. We need to overlook and be greater than our own ability to control another human being. And once we can get to that stage, whether we're a mother controlling our daughter, whether it's the husband is in this situation we mentioned controlling the wife, whether it's the father with the son, whatever the story is, that level of control, and that goes back to our belief and our belief structure that Allah Azza wa Jalla tawakkal ala Allah, that we rely on Allah Azza wa Jalla to do those things, and we take care of our responsibility and our wajibat, our obligations towards others, and we leave the rest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so that would mean that our society and our community would be very different to what it looks like now. And Allah knows if that's what He wants subhanahu wa ta'ala.
All right, Sheikh, I think there was a lot there to think about. Is there any final words of advice that you would have in light of this occasion for our audience?
Yeah, I think in particular for the brothers, you've got to really be a real man. And the real man isn't like a tough, macho, hairy chest, moustache, character that kind of chauvinistic. That's not what a real man is. And when we look at a real man, the only example we have is Rasulullah alayhi salatu wassalam. And he mentioned all the different things about women. We need to be gentle and soft with our women. And we have to win our wives, our mothers, our sisters over. That's the only way that those bonds in the society and the deen will be maintained, inshallah, increase those situations. In other words, through us winning them over, through our karam, through our akhlaq, through our generosity, through the words that we say, through the actions that we have. And then for the sisters, my biggest thing is, and I don't want anyone to take offence, but the question's been asked, and I think I have to be true to the audience, true to myself, and true to Allah Azza wa Jalla in answering that women are not like men. And although we live in this society where men and women are treated the same, they're not. They're equal, yes, but they're not the same. So women have to also firstly realise what Allah Azza wa Jalla wants from them, and in their difference from men, make their own mark. So that means that being innovative, that means that evolving what's there in the deen and what's there in terms of what we understand of life in our own way in this country, in this nation, in this city in particular, in the suburb that we may live in. So that doesn't necessarily mean that the old ways are the right ways, but that has to be done in a way that is respectful to those ways. And from that point, in other words, the sisters have got so much they can give and so much they can contribute, particularly in the time we live in with technology, and still maintain the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah knows best. Sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.
Okay, Jazakallah khair, Sheikh, once again, and it's highly appreciated.
The Y Factor.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد يا مسلمين صلوا عليه اللهم صل على محمد وصح محمد لطيف خبير سميع بصير جليل رقيب مجيب غفور شكور ودود قيوم رؤوف صبور مجيد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد يا مسلمين صلوا عليه اللهم صل على محمد وصحبه يا مؤمنين صلوا عليه. The Y Factor.
All right, so that brings us to the last segment for this week. Mashallah, I think, the interview Zaynab had a lot for us to think about and ponder upon. And I think, subhanAllah, it's such a pertinent issue in our community. And it's just really sad to see that's a reality, because if you have a look at the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, in his last address, which was the most important thing he had to say for humanity, he was like, like, I entrust you with the good care of women. And then you see from another side, we're just being treated, humiliated, degraded. And you think, seriously, if the Prophet ﷺ was alive today, what would he do? But you know what, last week on the show we mentioned that, subhanAllah, regardless of all this horrible situation on women, people are finding Islam, and more than half of the converts actually women, right? And it shows you, like, you know what, that's not the reality. Like, alhamdulillah, what we spoke about today, it was very important to raise awareness, but that's, the harsh reality that needs fixing. That's not the norm, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's up to our community to realize that's not the norm, that's not how it should be.
Exactly.
We deserve better. We don't,
I think it's about reviving the true Islamic spirit.
Exactly. And then when that happens, like, I mean, when Islam first came, it was a breakthrough religion, right? Like, people were, burying their daughters alive and things like that, and Islam came and said, hey, look, women are not, chattel, you can't just mistreat them and things like that. But it seems like we've just gone back to literally the days of Jahiliyyah.
Yeah, we've gone back not only in respect to women's rights, but on a number of issues, unfortunately. I think it's very important for us youth, inshallah, to bear the banner, because at the end of the day, we're going to be spouses, we're going to be mothers, we're going to be fathers, we're going to be uncles and aunties and things like that. And if we're not aware, and if we don't know Islamically what the stance is, we're just going to perpetuate these norms that are just going to plague our society. Exactly.
All right, so that brings us to the end of the show. But just quickly before we go, we have a couple of events we wanted to quickly run through. As we mentioned, the ISRA with Charles Sturt Uni are actually accepting enrollment for the Islamic Studies course for 2012. On the 27th of November, from 6 to 8 p.m, they're actually going to have information day. So if you are interested, make sure that you do pop by, and you can visit ISRA's website. Also, Al-Kawthar is having their heart therapy course on the 3rd and 4th of December, which is next weekend. It'll be held at UWS Bankstown, and it's an intensive course dealing with purification of the heart and related matters by Ustad Yahya Ibrahim, who's a brilliant speaker, originally Canadian, but he's actually living in Adelaide at the moment. So be sure to check out the Al-Kawthar website for more information and for registrations. Also, there is an event called Great Faiths Unite to discuss a spiritual antidote, which is held on Friday, December the 23rd, from 6:30 to 9:30 p.m, and it deals with depression, anxiety, stress, hopelessness, despair. And basically, Islam, Christianity and Buddhism are working together for a peaceful solution to, this issue. It will be held at the Waterview in Bicentennial Park. So if you are interested, you can actually visit the page of the event. It's on Facebook, so Great Faiths Unite to discuss a spiritual antidote, inshallah. So that should be something to look out for.
Also, there is another event happening on the 30th of November. It's called Breaking Down Barriers, Improving Responses to Muslim Women Experiencing Domestic Violence.
Wow, this is like spot on in relation to our segment this week.
Yeah.
So that's next Wednesday, inshallah. So that's the 30th of November.
And if you are interested in attending, I would suggest you contact breakingdownbarriers@hotmail.com. It's going to be in Mount Pritchard, in the community club.
And mashallah, the panel discussion lineup is actually really interesting. You've got Fawzia Clements from the Sexual Assault Counsellor. You've got Fatima Hassan, who's a domestic violence education and support worker. You've got Farache As-Safiri, who is an assistant coordinator of women's domestic violence court advocacy, and Constable Danny McCarthy, who's a domestic violence liaison officer. And obviously Hanan Jova will be speaking at this event too. And inshallah, it seems really awesome, but it's a full day thing and it needs registration and the like. Oh, actually, and Maha Abdu, the president of the Muslim Women's Association, will actually be discussing, and there's going to be a DVD documentary and some other very interesting things. So if you are interested, once again, be sure to visit to shoot them an email at
breakingdownbarriers@hotmail.com.
and inshallah they will get back to you, and that was it will be at Mount Pritchard, inshallah. Or actually there's a number 2, so you can call 1-800-111-146. so that was 1-800-111-146 for the event in relation to domestic violence against women. So that's about it, I guess, for this week, inshallah. Again, as we mentioned, a lot of very interesting things happening in the Muslim community. So be sure to keep an eye out for that. And I think it's, with a lot of people, it's holiday season now. So inshallah, be sure to use your holidays, wisely and contribute. Every week, inshallah, like we've been speaking about different community activism campaigns you can get involved in. SubhanAllah, there's so much out there to be done, and I think we really need to get out there and do something and use our time wisely. Actually, one more event we just found is on December the 27th, so that's next month. It's the 20th annual National Senior Muslim Youth Camp. It will actually be held in Victoria, and the cost is $395 to cover 8 nights and 9 days. So that's from the 27th of December to the 4th of January. If you're interested, you can go to www.ymacamps.org.au. So that was www.ymacamps.org.au, and that also gives you something to do over the summer. And inshallah, it's both open to brothers and sisters aged 16 years and above. Oh yeah, and I keep saying last thing, but inshallah Dar Aisha has actually opened the registrations too. So if you are interested in learning traditional classic Islamic scholarship, you've got the Auburn campus and the Lakemba campus, and it's open to both males and females, and you can do a range of topics from Quran, Tajweed, Arabic to actual Sharia and things like that.
And family law, they're offering that now.
Oh, cool. I think it'll be very interesting. So be sure to visit the Dar Aisha website for further information. All right, inshallah, listeners, take it to the Facebook page, inshallah. We'll have our expert on there too. If you wanted to ask either Sister Maha or Sheikh Haisam further questions about this episode. And again, if you have any comments or feedback about the Y Factor, be sure to shoot us an email. So without further ado, this is Tasnim and
Zaynab.
And thank you, Zaynab, for co-hosting once again.
No
You're
problem.
listening to the Y Factor on 87.6 FM.
The Y Factor.
The birds, I am in the trees, from the brown branches to the green leaves. I'm colorful, spectrum infinite. I touch all, indiscriminate. Breed compassion and sentiment. Limitless in my power to heal the hearts of men. But they're so forgetful, that's why I remind on the instrumental. This life is a trial, can never let the test affect your smile. Reach for your brother, go the extra mile. Kiss for your mother, hug your sister. Let your wife know that you miss her. Know that you can never give up. When you fall to the floor, I'm the reason you must get up. Love, I'm a blessing from God, so why you don't use me more? It's so odd. You need love, we need love. Love is all we need. Love is all we need. All we need is love.